I am, just a second, delighted to welcome a former ILIG committee member, Rachel Bickley, to talk to us today. Until just over a year ago, Rachel was an academic librarian in the UK, most recently, I think, at London Met. She was also well known to many in the library community as one of the stars of the e-book SOS movement. And then in August 2022, she upped and moved to Australia, leaving us all behind, and is now manager for research engagement at the University of Adelaide. She is going to talk to us about her experience of moving from working in a UK library to working in an Australian library under the intriguing title Sons, Snakes and Students, with, I hope, not too many snakes. And I should point out that she's doing so at 5:30 in the morning. So I, for one, am incredibly impressed that she can talk about anything at 5:30 in the morning. So without more ado, over to Rachel to prove that you can.
Thank you, Leslie, for that kind introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm just I've got some slides with some nice photos as well. So I'm just going to get that set up. If somebody could give me a shout if that's not sharing, but it looks like it should be okay. Yeah, okay, awesome. So hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It is early in the morning, but I've had my coffee, so it's okay. I spent a while trying to think of a good title for this and in conjunction with my colleagues, and we even tried ChatGPT. But in the end, I came up with Sun, Snakes and Students. So there's not too many snakes. I just wanted something that was, reflective of Australia. The photo I've got here, the Beware of Snakes photo, it is from one of our campuses, not our main one, but we have a campus about an hour north of Adelaide City, in a place called Roseworthy. It's rural, and that's where our animal and vet science students are. And being rural, you will sometimes come across snakes. So I think I took that photo the first time I went there last year, because it's not something I'm used to seeing on a university campus. There we go. All right. So good morning, good evening. Mani Napudni. That's Ghana language for good you all came. There's not exactly a Ghana word for welcome. So Mani Napudni, good you all came, is what you'll hear sometimes. And I'd like to start by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Ghana people. And they are the traditional custodians whose ancestral and unceded lands I'm lucky enough to live and work and play on. And I acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Ghana people to country, and I respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. I'd like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues who may be in attendance today. And this is customary in Australia before doing a presentation or a large meeting. We will take a moment to say an acknowledgement of country for the place where we are lucky enough to be. And I've got a couple of photos there from our campus. This is our Ghana Learning Circle on our campus. And my background, I think I've got the one on that's got the Ghana Learning Circle as well. And as is also customary with online meetings, if there are any Australian colleagues here, please do feel free to pop in the chat where you're joining us from this morning. If there is anybody here, depending on where you are, it might be even earlier than 5:30. Okay, so about me. So Leslie gave me a really lovely introduction, so I won't talk too much about myself, but I qualified as a librarian in 2010. So I have been working in the space for quite a while. I've always been in academic liaison. And as Leslie said, currently I'm the manager for research engagement, leading the team of liaison librarians in the University of Adelaide Library. Some other things about me. So Leslie did say she could hear some Australian coming through, but I think most people would agree I still sound like I am from the UK. I'm from Birmingham originally. That photo there is me and my dad going to see our team Aston Villa, who are the other reason why I'm up at very silly times sometimes as well over here to see what they're doing. I'm also a massive lover of travel, particularly solo travel. I've cheated a bit with that photo because I was actually with friends. That's in Morialta Conservation Park, but it's got me on my own. I do write a travel blog. I haven't actually written anything since the pandemic, but I will get back into that, but I put that in there as well. I love being outdoors, being on the beach, being active. So this photo here is me learning to surf, first time I was in Australia, and I need sun to thrive. So these are all kind of factors in me and why I'm here in Australia. So a little kind of story about how I got here. So I appreciate there might be some people here today because they're interested in knowing actually how you can move to Australia. So I thought I'd start with that. I hope you'll stick around for the rest of it, even if this is what you're interested in. But I thought I'd start here. So way back in 2016, I decided to take a career break to go traveling. I'd never really traveled. I've not had a gap year or anything like that. So I went backpacking in Southeast Asia, and then I decided I may as well hop over to Australia and do a working holiday. So Australia is one of the countries where a lot of young people from the UK go and get a working holiday visa. So it allows you to work under certain conditions. The idea is that you work and travel. So I just worked in random jobs for a few months and then traveled. It was an amazing experience and one that I recommend all young people do. Sort of a year into that, in 2017, I decided actually, like, I didn't really want to go home. I actually really wanted to stay in Australia and see if I could make a life here. So I started trying to get employer sponsorship as a librarian. So I hadn't worked as a librarian in Australia. I picked out Mankey onions and potatoes. I worked in retail. I worked in call centres. It's all those kind of jobs that you tend to do on that visa. But I started trying. I had a few interviews at university libraries, but university libraries are not swimming in money, so obviously there isn't much scope there to be sponsoring people at that librarian level. So I had no luck there. In 2018, my visa ran out, so I came back to the UK, and I was very lucky to get straight back into academic libraries. There was an opportunity for a 3-month temporary role to start straight away up in Leeds Arts University, and I just happened to be there at the right time. But I definitely still wanted to come back, so I spoke to a migration agent and I started looking into my options for going back on an independent skilled work visa, so not sponsored by a company or an organisation, but sponsored by one of the states, and you go and you find your own job. And in January 2020, I was finally at a point after all of the various steps you have to go through to apply for something called a subclass 491. So that's an independent skilled work visa sponsored by the state, in my case sponsored by the state of South Australia. So South Australia said, yes, we have a shortage of librarians, and we'll pay for you to come here. So I applied for that in January. It's generally quite a quick process. I was mentally preparing to be in Adelaide by about August, September of that year. For obvious reasons, that didn't happen. So that takes us all the way up to April 2022, when out of the blue my visa was granted. So I put in my 3 months notice at work, started making the preparations to move. I got very lucky in that a liaison librarian position came up at the University of Adelaide, and they were happy to interview me via Zoom for it. And luckily I got the job, and they were happy to wait for me to get there in August, late August, start September, to arrive in Adelaide and start work. So I did the liaison librarian job for about 7 months. A few months into my time there, the manager role became vacant, and then it was a little bit of a hiring freeze. And when that opened up, I decided to apply for it. So I had been working at manager level in London Met. For various reasons, I thought it would be best to go for a liaison librarian role when I first came. But I decided to go back for the management role, and I got the role. So I've been doing that since April of this year. So I will stress that this is my journey. There are a lot of different ways of doing this. I've met other British librarians in Australia who came a different way. And this was also very much of the time. So if anybody is interested, my recommendation would be speak to a migration agent. They will do an initial consultation for free. I highly recommend the Down Under Centre if you're in the UK. So if you just Google Down Under Centre, you'll find them. They are absolutely amazing. If there's a way for you to get here, they will find it. So that's how I got here. So welcome to Adelaide, South Australia, where I'm speaking to you from this morning. So here we are on a map. We were recently named Australia's coolest city by Wall Street Journal. I suspect Sydney and Melbourne would have something to say about that, but I had to put that in there. But, I think we are pretty cool. A short history or short kind of few notes about Adelaide, because I appreciate if you have visited Australia, it might not be somewhere you've been. People tend to go to this east coast or maybe to Perth. That's actually quite a bit closer to the UK. You're looking at about 5 or 6 hours of flights across the country. So Adelaide is a wine capital of the world. So it's officially one of the wine capitals. It's got across South Australia, I believe there's 18 different wine regions, and quite a few of them are very close to Adelaide. And if you're a wine drinker, you probably have bought South Australian wine before. So I think probably the most well-known in the UK is Jacob's Creek. That's kind of thought as being a bit rubbish here. But also there's that's in the Barossa Valley, which is just north of Adelaide. It's about an hour and a quarter drive. Hardy's, Wolf Blass, Penfolds. I remember seeing all of those in the UK as well. They're all nearby. So it's a fantastic place if you're into wine. So many wine tours. We have absolutely beautiful beaches in easy reach of the city as well. So I live in the city centre. I don't have a car, but I can hop on the train or the bus or the tram and be at a stunning beach in like half an hour. So that's what I do in my weekends in the summer. We're a very small city, so if you've been to somewhere like Sydney or Melbourne, we are nothing like that. That kind of street in the picture there is I suppose, our main shopping street in the city. So we're a pretty small city centre. If you're flying to Adelaide, you can sort of see that from the plane, how small the city centre is. But it's, quite chilled out. People like living here. We've got a great food and drink scene, so it's not just the wine. We've got a great food scene here as well. And we have loads of festivals and arts events. Probably the most well-known is the Adelaide Fringe, which seems to me like it's kind of the equivalent of the Edinburgh Fringe. So it's, it's a place where people want to come in Australia to perform. And that was really fun last year. That's February, March. And we have a Mediterranean climate. So we have very hot, dry summers, and the winters are cooler and can be a bit wet and windy. We're in spring at the moment. It's very much up and down. So last Friday it was 40 degrees. I went to the beach after work. This week it's been sort of 22, 23. So we're still stabilising, but it stopped raining. It probably won't rain in any real capacity till maybe March now. So that's the kind of climate we're in. So that's a brief history of Adelaide. In terms of the University of Adelaide, just a little bit of a history of that as well. So we are a group of 8 university. So group of 8 is, as the name suggests, a group of 8 universities in Australia. It's research intensive universities, the leading universities. So I suppose it's a bit like the Russell Group in the UK. We've got about 27,000 students, mixture of undergraduates and postgraduates. And I've got a few kind of stats there. So founded in 1874, it's known for being the first Australian university that admitted women to all degree courses on an equal basis to men. I've noted a few of our well-known alumni there. So we've got the Antarctic explorer Douglas Mawson, the first female Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard. She'll pop up again later on in my photos. And the first Australian to walk in space, so astronaut called Andy Thomas. Plenty of others as well, and it's quite nice on the campus. We have pictures of some of our famous alumni around here. That top picture is the front of our main campus on North Terrace in the city. Those are the jacaranda trees. So I think I took this last year, but these trees are coming out now as well. So it's really beautiful. Down here, we've got a picture from our Roseworthy campus where I took the snake picture earlier. So when I first came here as liaison librarian, I used to drive up there about once a month to go and see the students up there. And they do have alpacas who are very friendly and will come to see you. So that's Roseworthy. And then we've got another campus in the southern suburbs, in the foothills of the Adelaide Hills, a place called Waite. And that's where our School of Agriculture, Food and Wine lives. And that picture there is from the university winery. So there is a winery and there is a brewery as well. Every so often they do have a wine sale, so you can buy the university wine. As I put there, wine science is one of the things in which we're world leaders. So if you want to study wine, there's basically 3 places in the world that are the best places to do it. So there's University of Adelaide, also University of Bordeaux, and I believe UC Davis in California. World leaders in quite a few things, but I just highlighted a few that I really like. So space law, I didn't know it was a thing until I got here, but space law, we do a lot of research in. Space agriculture, we've got a whole centre that's looking at that element of, how do we sustain trips to places like Mars. It always makes me think of that film The Martian, or the book The Martian, where it's figuring out how to grow potatoes, with a bit more than that. Photonics and advanced sensing, so that's all about light and sensing. And yes, of course, our wine science as well. So lots going on. And this is the Barsmith Library, where I spend most of my time. So this is the main library on the city campus. We have, like a lot of libraries, 24/7 access to certain areas, so the study spaces and some of the book stock. So it's actually one of the oldest academic libraries in Australia. So it was around the campus before 1932 by opening its current building then. This picture at the bottom here is our reading room, which everybody loves. The students refer to it as the Harry Potter room. If you need to take photos for anything, that's where we'll go. And you can even hire it for your wedding photos. So every so often it gets hired out the weekend for weddings as well. At the University Library, we of course support research. So it's a leading research university, but also teaching and learning as well. And the library includes the university archives and the special collections, and the university record keeping sits within that team as well. So these photos of the Barsmith Library, the main one. We do have small libraries at the other campuses, and we do have a law library also on campus at the main campus as well. But Barsmith is where I spend most of my time. And bear me a second, my laptop not wanting to move on. There we go. So what I do, so as I said, I lead what we call the research and engagement team in the library. So that is 5 liaison librarians. You can see 3 of them here, Karen, Paula and Ryan. The other 2 have been very good at avoiding photos. I couldn't find any with them in, so I'm going to have to remedy that before I next do a presentation. So we support, as I've put there, I've just sort of taken it from the library operational plan really. So we support research excellence and impact in the university, and that's for both staff and student researchers. So my team recently, earlier this week, did a webinar for what we call HDR students, PGR students, PhD students, on introducing them to their research impact metrics, for example. So we support kind of lots of different areas of research. So what we call strategic publishing decisions, so helping people look at things like journal impact factor, their open access options, open access responsibilities, their research impact metrics. This year we started working with our research services in the university to deliver some targeted webinars on finding your impact metrics at the same time as grant applications are due in, so that we can sort of target that. Research data management is something my team and other parts of the library support as well. And then, of course, there's the things like the advanced searching, systematic reviews team support as well. So this picture down the bottom here, this was our planning for workshops earlier in the year. Posting notes, surprisingly effective, this kind of thing. So this now lives above my desk. And then here we've got a picture in the reading room, of course, of 2 of the winners of the Visualise Your Thesis competition this year. So that's another thing that my team does. We organise the University of Adelaide's participation in the Visualise Your Thesis competition. If you don't know what that is, essentially PhD students get to compete for prizes by creating 1-minute videos that communicate their research. So it's a fantastic opportunity for them to develop their science communication skills, and it's also really nice to see what they come up with as well. So that's what we do in short. I don't possibly have time this morning to tell you sort of the differences and the similarities between the UK and Australia in what we do across all of those things. But I thought I'd just highlight a few elements of the context in which my team works, and the ways in which that might be a little bit different or similar to what we have back home. So I wanted to start talking about open access first. So those of you who know me might know that I love open access. I did have my t-shirt on. Forgot to say this photo here was Open Access Week this week. So big fan of open access. So a lot of what my team does is actually around supporting queries around open access. So like most universities, I think in the UK as well as in Australia, not all of them, but most do have an open access policy. So that's the university policy. But it's very much promoted and supported by my team of liaison librarians. So it's us who goes out and tells people about it and helps them to understand what their responsibilities are and what their options are. There is still work to do in getting researchers to understand it. So we've had an open access policy since 2019. This year it was updated. So my team have been doing a lot of getting out, going to school meetings, telling people about it. I've been to a few meetings with them, and there's been a number of kind of blank faces. And I get the impression that there's quite a few people out there who think this is a brand new thing that the library is enforcing on them. So we've still got work to do in getting researchers to understand that, it's a university policy. This is what's required of them. This is what it is. This is what it means. Yeah, we'll get there. But I suspect other people working in the research support space in the UK as well have had similar experiences. So two of the biggest funders in Australia are the Australian Research Council, the ARC, and the National Health and Medical Research Council. So there are others, but these two provide a lot of the grant funding that researchers apply for. Like most grant funders, they also have open access policies, and I've just noted there, just for interest, the ARC allows an embargo on the open access for 12 months, but the NHMRC have recently changed their policy requiring immediate open access, and we are actually working with research services to try and get a list of current NHMRC grant holders so we can actually reach out and make sure they understand what this means, that their research output has to be available open access immediately, and to help them make that happen. So help them understand what their options are there. Anybody here who's working in the research space as well? I'm sure you work with read and publish agreements, transformative agreements. So in Australia, we have these as well. They are negotiated by CAUL, who are the Council of Australian University Librarians. So a little bit to my understanding, in a similar way to how JISC negotiate them in the UK. I have to say here that actually in the UK, I pretty much worked in teaching and learning. So the research space was fairly new to me. So not only was it, in a new country, I was sort of learning a lot of stuff for the first time as well. So if anybody who maybe knows more than me about the research landscape in the UK wants to chip in the chat, please do. So CAUL do, some similar things to JISC. So negotiated agreements, content procurement through the CAUL consortium, that kind of thing. So we have a number. They run from January to December because that's our academic year. And they include, so some of them have expired, ones that have got caps on have expired now, and we're just sort of looking at getting them set up for next year. So some we've got Wiley and Hindawi, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Sage, Springer Nature, although ours does not include nature journals. My understanding is JISC has just negotiated a new deal with Springer Nature for the UK, which does include those. So we're kind of bracing ourselves for queries coming through. My mate in the UK can publish in Nature. Why can't we? Kind of thing. So we'll see how that goes. Something that's really interesting is that the chief scientist of Australia, which is somebody called Dr. Cathy Foley, she's actually recommended and is very keen on working towards a nationwide open access strategy for Australia. So not just within institutions, but for the whole country. And I just took some of her words from her web pages. So she's working towards an open access strategy for Australia, and her kind of approach is that, in simple terms, open access means that anyone should be able to read the published research in the research journals without facing a paywall. And it means the researchers themselves should be able to publish their work openly without having to pay an extra fee for the privilege. Authors retain copyright and the work can be shared, including for teaching in schools and universities. This sounds amazing, and we're all looking forward to seeing what comes next. It would be really interesting to see if this comes to fruition. I'm not sure if there's any other countries in the world that have an open access strategy, like a nationwide one. And so it would be definitely very interesting to see what happens here with what Dr. Cathy Foley would like to do. And it's amazing as well that our chief scientist is so pro open access and understands what it means as well. So very exciting times, and we'll see what happens there. Something else I also wanted to touch on was research assessment in Australia. So how research is assessed. It's obviously that's the context in which we work as well. So from 2010 to 2018, there was a research exercise, I suppose, like the REC in the UK. And this was the ERA, the Excellence in Research for Australia, delivered by the Australian Research Council. And this compares research in Australian universities against international benchmarks. It uses something called field of research codes to define the disciplines. And this is something that we use in metrics as well. It's quite handy. And there were different ways of assessing or deciding what research outputs were eligible and assessing them. So it varied by the disciplines. So citation analysis was sometimes used. In other areas, peer review would be used. And there was also an ERA journal list used for each round, which listed all journals of which publication would be eligible. So we were prepping, when I first started last year, we were prepping for an ERA 2023 round, but then it was announced in August that it wasn't going to go ahead. And actually the ARC is looking to develop a new approach. So they've got an ERA transition working group, and that's looking to develop what they describe as a modern data-driven approach to research assessment. And that'll be for implementation from 2024 to 25. So we're still waiting for the results there. But at the moment, there's no ERA. So they produced a journal list and everything and then said we weren't going to do it. So we haven't had to deal with that this year. At the same time, I haven't put it on the slides, but the ARC have done a wider review, which also impacts upon preparation and review, decision-making for grant funding and the impact metrics. So there is a lot going on in the Australian research landscape at the moment that we have to keep an eye on, because that's going to impact how we support researchers as well. I've put a note in here about my impressions so far on grant applications. So I said a little bit earlier, this year, me and my team have been working with research services to deliver webinars on finding your impact metrics, in tools. Some of you might be familiar with CIVAL and tools like that, Altmetric Explorer. And my impression so far is that when we look at the grant applications, there's very much an emphasis on the traditional citation impact, your H-index, and relevant alternative metrics, so things like policy mentions. It seems this quite entrenched, and again, this is my impression so far, it seems quite entrenched still in the traditional metrics. I mean, I think that's probably true in the UK as well. And I think there needs to be, a massive overhaul of the whole system if we're going to look at research assessment in different ways. But yeah, that's what I've noticed. It's still quite traditional. And my team is actually often asked to supply metrics to senior leadership within the university. So sometimes they'll come through the university librarian, so senior people in the university, and say they want to see who's publishing in Q1 journals, for example. And that will come to me and my team because we know how to use the tools. So we'll produce reports for that as well. So moving on, something else which is really important in the context in which we work and which is very different to the UK is the context of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research. Now, my impression starting here last year, as I said, when I was here on a working holiday visa, I never worked in libraries or universities, so I hadn't really been exposed to it. I was walking around the campus at University of Adelaide, and it really struck me how I thought I could have been in a UK university. It just looked so similar. There wasn't really anything that gave me a clue that I was in a country on the other side of the world. And that really brought home to me how much, like a lot of things here, a European colonial system of higher education has just been kind of plonked down and enforced here. And that really struck me when I started. So there is work being done in Australia to try and, I suppose, ensure cultural safety for research by and about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So there is the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, IARTSIS, and they're an Australian government statutory authority, and with their own words, they tell the story of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia and shape our national narrative. So they produced a code of ethics for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research. My next slide, I'll talk more about the code. But all at University of Adelaide, research is affected by this. So the university is committed to it. So anybody doing research here that concerns or impacts Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples must comply with this code. And the same goes for any funded research from the ARC and the NHMRC. There's two big funders as well. Again, that concerns or impacts Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And probably most of the institutes and research bodies in Australia are committed to the code as well. When I was talking to a colleague about what I wanted to share with you around what we're doing to facilitate culturally safe Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research, I was talking to a few people because obviously I'm still very new to this world, and she thought it was really important to emphasise, and I'm going to paraphrase her because I think this is really important. She wanted to emphasise that this doesn't just affect what we're doing today and looking forward, but from the perspective of academic libraries, we actually care for a long legacy of research that wasn't done in appropriate ways. So the challenge of reconciliation is present not just in what we're doing now, but also in the collections that we hold. And that again is something that we're doing within the university. So looking at what we can do to kind of aid cultural safety and foreground Indigenous voices in our collections. So I'll talk about that shortly as well. But I thought that was a really important point, and I'm glad she raised that. I wanted to bring that in as well. So I've just taken a screenshot from this code here. So it's outlined around these 4 principles: Indigenous self-determination, Indigenous leadership, impact and value, and sustainability and accountability. And again, this applies to any research in Australia that is being done on or which impacts Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And each principle, we might not be able to read it very well, but each principle frames a set of responsibilities for researchers and institutions and review bodies who are engaging in this research. So just as an example, there might be different protocols in how data is stored or knowledge is shared. So again, I talked about kind of, we've plonked this European, UK, Western system of higher education and research down here, and things like intellectual property and sharing data, that kind of thing, can sometimes clash with Indigenous ways of knowledge and Indigenous ways of knowledge sharing. So it's really important that we do have a code like this, that people understand that they have responsibilities if they are doing research that impacts Indigenous people here. Something else we also promote is something called the CARE principles for Indigenous data governance. So these are not Australian specific. These were created by the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. So that stands for, again, I'm quoting from the website. So they're there for advancing Indigenous data sovereignty and governance, asserting Indigenous people's rights and interests in data, advocating for data for the self-determined well-being of Indigenous peoples, and reinforcing the rights to engage in decision-making in accordance with Indigenous values and collective interests. So this is looking at Indigenous peoples across the world. But we do think this is something that is important, and this is something that we will promote as well. So the CARE principles sort of sit alongside those FAIR principles for research data management. So if anyone is working in that space, I'm sure you're familiar with FAIR: findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. But when you're dealing with data that impacts Indigenous people, you also need to consider other things as well. So the collective benefit, the authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And I do, if you're interested in this, do go to the GIDA website and have a look. And I haven't checked if anyone uses the hashtag. I know Twitter kind of died a death a little bit now. But there is even a Be Fair and Care hashtag as well, and there's a nice graphic there. So again, I can't possibly tell you about everything that we do and everything that's going on, but just to highlight a few other things. So I've talked a bit about Indigenous research. There's also a lot of work going on around decolonisation. And back in the UK, I was very much involved in decolonising the curriculum, but there, of course, it means something very different. So reshaping my understanding of what decolonising the curriculum or the universal library means has been something I've done. Again, there's way too much for me to tell you about, but I just wanted to highlight a few things that we're doing here. So The university has the Future Learning Strategy, Indigenous Academic Strategy, TACA. And this, amongst other things, it seeks to increase Aboriginal student and staff numbers and actually make the university a world leader in teaching and research excellence for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders education, and also seeks to ensure that Aboriginal students are supported to thrive here in the uni. So we have our uni called Work Yalu, who help to ensure that that happens as well. In the library, we are also committed to improving access and improving research and teaching excellence for Indigenous people as well. So we have an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander engagement framework. I had a little chat with one of the Associate University Librarians the other day about this. She wanted to highlight a few things around that as well. So I can't share with you yet, it's still being developed, but we are developing an Indigenous employment strategy. So Indigenous representation in libraries in Australia is very low, and we want to work towards changing that. In a couple of weeks' time, we're about to have our coordinator for Indigenous library programs join our learning support team. So the key point here is that they are library qualified, and we're acknowledging that Indigenous understanding and culture and connection is what we require. And we're also very careful that this person is not going to have, everything Indigenous is not going to be their responsibility. We're making sure that there isn't going to be a cultural load on that person, but we're very excited to have her start very soon, week after next. We are currently recruiting an Indigenous graduate librarian, which I'm really excited about. So a graduate trainee position that is open to Indigenous people. And I believe they'll be with us for 2 years, cycling around different teams and getting that experience of academic library work. We've also got, I suppose, breaking news. So yesterday, there was a national set of guidelines for First Nations collection description launched. I did sign up for the webinar to go and see that. Unfortunately, other things took over, so I haven't watched it yet. So I'm not quite sure what is in that, but I do know that they've been developed after an audit of Indigenous collections in several state libraries across Australia. And this is also something that we've thought about as well in terms of our metadata in discovery and what words and phrases we've been using and what's been used in the past, and what we need to do now. So again, there's lots more I could say about that, but that's just the introduction. I've put links there if people want to read a bit more about what's going on there. Some other things, open educational resources, OER, have become really big in Australia as well. So CAUL, that Council of Australian University Librarians, has a OER collective. So this includes a shared open textbook publishing platform for participating institutions. We participate in that as well. So we're actually trying to facilitate some OER publishing from the university. And there's also a community of practice and collaborative cross-institutional publishing. So I know we've been contacted by someone from another institution who's interested in maybe working with someone, an academic from our place, on an OER textbook. And we've also got our fabulous learner support team and open textbook coordinator who are doing a lot to try and promote the use of OERs in the university. And then finally, the Universities Accord. So this is a big government-driven review of the Australian HE system. Final report due later this year. So I was going to say later this year, next month, as the year is flying by. So we'll see what comes out of that, and what actions we might have from that as well. So that's in general what we've been doing. In terms of what we are doing in our university, we actually have quite a lot about to happen. So the University of Adelaide will be merging with the University of South Australia to form a new Adelaide University. It's already got its name, from the 1st of January 2026. So this is big, obviously. Just a little bit of history about this. So it was actually included in the manifesto of the Labor Party, who were elected to the state government of South Australia last year in the elections. So it was something that they included. So it's been driven from the state government level. the thinking behind this is really the strengthening of the higher education sector and research excellence in South Australia. So the aim is that we'll bring in more students. They want to widen participation, really ensure that students from regions can get in, those from non-traditional backgrounds can access education, university education. And there's also a lot of aims around attracting more research funding and being a bigger institution. That might be something that happens as well. So that's why the state government wants to do it, and that's why the two vice chancellors have agreed to go ahead and work with them on this. So in terms of where we're at, we're still very much in the planning stage. So it still has to pass Parliament, but recently the government secured enough votes in the upper house to secure the passage of the legislation through Parliament. So it's not there yet, but it looks very, very likely that it's going to pass. So when it has passed and we know 100% it's going ahead, there'll be more work to do. But at the moment, it's really planning stage, and I think most in the library, other than the university librarian and the senior managers, haven't really yet been involved in any direct merger work. But we've had lots of meetings, town halls with the vice chancellor, and the university's just launched a website called Idea Place, where we've been putting ideas up for things to do in the new university, and we're voting on them and commenting on them. So that's been very interesting to see what people across both universities have suggested. So there is still very much in the planning stage, but that's where we're at with that. There is a website already for the new university. So if you just go to adelaideuni.edu.au, that's got a lot of information about where we're at in the process and what the aims are if anyone is interested. And I've put a note there that the government is committing funding to this. So they've said already that they'll commit a $1 million equity scholarship fund. I'm not sure what the exchange rate is at the moment, but I think that's probably about 50-60 million pounds, and a $200 million research fund as well. And this is something that is totally new to me. So I know, back home we've had, I suppose, plenty of low-scale mergers, like with colleges joining universities, but I'm pretty sure there hasn't been a merger like this, of this size, in the UK since Manchester, when I think it was the Victoria University of Manchester and the Manchester Institute of Science and Technology merged to become University of Manchester. That was in 2004, which before I started working. So totally new to me, and it'll be, I think, an interesting journey for all of us involved in this. Some of the highlights so far, I sort of put a few photos. So I mentioned Julia Gillard, the first Prime Minister of Australia, earlier. So I was lucky enough to meet her last year when she was doing a book signing. That was not long after I started. It was very exciting to meet her. She was very lovely. She is, I can't remember her title, but she's involved in the university. So apparently you can bump into her on campus sometimes, which is very exciting. We didn't plan to match our outfits, but it was a nice coincidence there. I've had a lot of opportunities to present as well, so I don't know if you can see this very well. This is a screenshot from Research Support Community Day earlier this year. Lots of universities, library staff coming together to talk about research support. So myself and one of my colleagues presented on what we do in terms of supporting early career researchers to demonstrate their research impact. I also presented at the New Librarian Symposium. This is a screenshot here. So I talked to a lot of new librarians about this idea of activism and being information literate librarians, using eBook SOS as a case study there. So that was fun as well. And then a couple of months ago, I got to go to my first Australian conference, like in-person conference, with myself and my colleague Alexis. We went to a conference called eResearch Australasia up in Brisbane. Massive conference, really interesting, not library specific. It was full of people across universities who are supporting research. I came away with lots of notes and lots of things to think about. So plenty of highlights, but that's just a few of them. Challenges, the main challenges, and again, this is for me, it might be different for other people, but these are the things that jump out at me as the main challenges for working in a new country. A totally different academic year. So in Australia, the academic year runs January to December. So no, different academic year diaries to your calendar year. But that was a bit weird. Starting in September, mentally in my head, I was preparing for induction, and actually, no, you're preparing for the end of the year. So I'm still getting used to how that works, busy times. So I'm incredibly busy at the moment in the same way that I would be incredibly busy in June in the UK. I was saying earlier before most of you joined, I can't get in the mindset that it's nearly Christmas and I need to do Christmas things, because the queues just aren't there with work and the weather and that kind of thing. So I'm still getting used to that. Learning the new lingo, you'd be amazed how many new kind of words, phrases, abbreviations you have to learn. So things like HDRs rather than PGRs, and just learning how things work a little differently. So the ERA research assessment rather than the REF, that kind of thing. And every so often someone still says something and I'm like, I actually don't know what that is, but I'm more confident now at talking and asking about that. Building up your network again from scratch. This is a weird thing to do as well. So, I worked in the UK in academic libraries for many years. I knew a lot of you. I could go to a conference and I'd see lots of people I knew. It's been strange to have to really start that again. It really is good. I enjoy meeting people and I'm getting there. But yeah, you really are starting from scratch. And the same with your social network outside of work. Now, I came here on my own. I don't have a partner, I don't have children. I don't know many people in Australia. I didn't know many people when I got here. I don't have family here. So outside of work, just going from having friends or family around me to not having that, you have to again build it again. You have to start from scratch, start all over again. And I think the biggest thing for me is this feeling of being very experienced. I've worked in libraries for years. I know what I'm doing, but I'm also entirely new at the same time. Entirely new to the Australian research landscape, the HE landscape. I spent a lot of time, even before I got here, trying to learn, trying to understand. But there's still, even now, there'll still be times where something might come up and, the person talking to me would reasonably expect someone in my position to understand some context or know what this thing that happened in the past was. And I don't. And again, I feel more confident now about just saying, I don't know what that is, please tell me. But it's tricky when you first start. You don't want to seem like you don't know what you're doing. You do, but you're just in that new environment, and you can read as much as you can before you start. But there's still going to be things you learn on the job as well. I'm just checking the times. I appreciate I've talked a lot. I'm nearly finished. Life outside of work. This is really just an excuse to share lots of nice photos with you. So I said Adelaide's the wine capital of the world. So here's me a few weeks ago at a spring winery event. It's me learning to paddleboard. This is me seeing koalas on a hike. Getting back into my running. So it's a great place if you're into active stuff. There's lots of other lovely places in Australia to visit as well. So this winter, I took a trip up north to Cairns. This photo is from Fitzroy Island in the Great Barrier Reef. We also had the excitement of the Women's World Cup this year in Australia. So I went up to Brisbane to see England play Haiti. So that's very exciting. I've got this lovely sunset photo here. That's to represent something which I found tricky, which is that driving is really necessary here. So back in the UK, particularly in London, I never had a car, never really needed to drive. I know how to, but that's something I've had to get back into here. It's not my favourite thing. Driving in Adelaide is terrible, but there we go. So that's a big difference. And then I've got a photo here of me and a few friends. This was taken a few weeks ago. I only met these ladies a couple of months ago. So it is hard to make friends as an adult. It's hard to build up that social network. And it has taken me a while to find like a little group of people that I can go. So we've just been hiking, see that koala. And then actually the first time I met them was this winery tour, and one of them's a great photographer. So I've got a lovely photo there. So I think don't underestimate that. If you are making a similar move, you have to really just keep plugging away at meeting people and making friends outside of work. And I think that brings me to my top tips. Yeah, so I swore by a spreadsheet, stay on top of everything with the move. That's my biggest tip for anyone moving overseas. You need spreadsheets with different tabs on for things you need to do at home, things you need to do when you get there, things you need to buy, that kind of thing. And something that really helped me was just reaching out to my current networks and contacts as soon as I shared publicly that I was moving to Australia. I put it all over Twitter, LinkedIn, asked people to introduce me. And actually, that's how I sort of got in contact with some people I work with now, people I know here. It just so happens, someone on Twitter knows someone else, that kind of thing. So it's really worth actually actively reaching out and saying, does anybody know anyone in X country? Would love for an introduction, would love to talk about job opportunities, that kind of thing. Another tip that I got from someone in my network introduced me to, who works over here, was email the hiring manager for jobs you're applying for to ask questions, because things might be slightly different in how, what's expected from job applications. And you don't want to not be shortlisted for, just missing out on a convention that you didn't know about. So email the hiring manager, just say, hey, I'm new to the country. I've got my working rights, but I just wanted to check because this might be different to what I'm used to. And then outside of work, like I said, just keep working on those social connections. You need people outside of work, especially if you're here on your own. So you have to keep plugging away at it. So join Facebook and meetup groups, go to events. If you don't meet anyone there, go to another event, and always say yes to invitations. And my experience has been that you will get there, just might take a little while. Okay, and I think I've definitely talked for way too long, and we've got a little bit of time left for any questions. If anybody wants to talk to me about Australian libraries or moving or anything like that, feel free. And my colleagues would not have forgiven me if I hadn't put a picture of our pigeon overlord in Adelaide as well. So this is yes, our pigeon overlord, who lives in the city centre next to the Nespresso shop. Okay.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was absolutely fascinating. It was really interesting to see the difference between all the things that were so similar between UK and Australian libraries, and then suddenly the differences. And I think for those of us watching in November in the UK, your photographs were really cruel.
I'm sorry.
We have a few minutes for questions. There are a couple of things in the chat. I know that we do have somebody here who has done the same journey in reverse. So I don't know, Annette, if you have anything that you would like to ask or to say.
Hi, Rachel. I just say I totally agree with what you're saying, having done it in reverse. I came to Southampton University in March. I had my interview over Teams. Very experienced with over 20 years working in the industry, and just finding the language is so different. I used to work at the State Library of South Australia, which is a stone's throw away from the University of Adelaide, and I know colleagues at the University of Adelaide. But yeah, it's culturally, you think it's similar, but it's actually very different. And I think all you said about contacts and connections with people, it's very hard as an adult, and just to keep plugging away. And also just learning the way things work, like the health system here is very different. Finding somewhere to live. It's got similarities, but it's also very different. And I was just really pleased to hear that that your experience is very similar to mine. So yeah, so thank you.
Thanks, Annette.
Thanks, Annette. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I can see there's a couple in the chat. Access to research in the UK sounds like a similar sentiment. I hadn't heard of that, no, but like I said, I'm very much from a teaching and learning background. So it's interesting to hear from people who know a bit more about the research landscape in the UK. I will have a look at that. That sounds really interesting. Thank you. And Kirsty says, will the PowerPoint be sent around afterwards? I'm happy to pass that on to you and Aidan, Leslie, if you want to send the PowerPoint round. Yes, there's lots of links people can have a look at if they're interested in things.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Yes, Kirsty, I think, is saying she's really interested in the Aboriginal work and the links. So I think we would all find the links interesting.
Yeah.
I was very interested in what you said right at the end, because I was going to ask about opportunities for professional networking across Australia rather than within the university, and particularly any opportunities for you to build on the activism for which we know you so well.
Yeah, so obviously Australia being a very big country, in terms of like networking is very much, I found it's very much sort of on a local level, which is, so ALIA, which is the professional body in Australia, has, you know, state groups, and I haven't managed to go to anything in South Australia yet, but I know they have the committee here will do tours to different libraries and have socials and that kind of thing. Which is one of the reasons why going to that conference in Brisbane was great. It was great to actually meet people that I'd only spoken to on Twitter or spoken to via email. There's still, I mean, we all know Twitter's struggling a little bit at the moment, but there are still opportunities. You know, like I said, I did know through Twitter quite a few people before I got here. In terms of the activism stuff, I have done, as well as the presentation I mentioned earlier at the New Librarian Symposium, I did do a presentation with Open Access Australasia, introducing the ebook SOS work that we've done. There is a lot of interest. People see a lot of similarities with the problems in the UK and problems in Australia. I haven't really kind of followed up on that, but I think there definitely is the interest there. And I think people are experiencing very similar things. So I know there are definitely a few people who are keen to get on the ebook SOS train. So yeah, that's something I want to pick up for sure.
Yeah, that would be great. And I do realise you've only been there just over a year, haven't you? So
yes,
you to build up your profile within your institution first. Does anybody else have any questions? Any more questions? Yes, Aidan.
You're on mute, Aidan.
You're muted, Aidan.
You talked of differences between Australian Indigenous approaches to knowledge management, intellectual property, and so on, and what you were familiar with. What's the most striking one?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I think there's just things I hadn't really thought about in terms of, I suppose, something that I have seen talked about a lot is just this idea of what research is and what knowledge is and what a research method is. And in our kind of Western ways of thinking, we think that, you know, research methods are, you know, getting data and getting numbers and, you know, using all these, you know, different ways of analysing data. But I've seen some Aboriginal research which makes use of methods like yarning. So yarning is a practice where you get together and storytell and talk. And that's how knowledge is passed on. That's how knowledge is passed on for a long time. And actually that's a research method as well. It's just not something that in our ways of thinking we would think of. So it's really like breaking down what your own thinking is as well, just because of, you know, what the area in which we work. Really sort of breaking that down. If anybody is interested in this, Charles Darwin University, CDU up in Darwin, they've got a lot of videos on their YouTube channel talking about Indigenous research from Indigenous research perspectives. Really short videos. I watched one yesterday that was talking about things like research protocols and gender. So often in Aboriginal culture, men and women will meet in different places separately to share knowledge, to discuss things. And, you know, there's the question of, is that something that can be brought in when people are doing that kind of qualitative research as well? So there's lots of little things like that. So Charles Darwin University on their YouTube channel, they've got lots of stuff there as well.
Thanks.
Thank you, Aidan. Any other? We've just got a excuse me, a moment or two more. If not, I'll just finish with one perhaps. Is there anything that surprised you more than anything else?
Oh, I should have been prepared for that question.
Sorry, Rachel.
I know, it's just I'm trying to think of something on the spot.
Work related or not?
Work related or not. nothing jumps to mind, but I had of course spent time in Australia previously, even though it was in a different environment. So there were probably things, way back when I first came to Australia that did surprise me, but I've just kind of forgotten them because it was so long ago. I'm trying to think of something.
Sounds as though you're very well prepared.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sounds as though you were very well prepared.
Thank you. I will say something actually, and I hope Australian colleagues who might be here will forgive me. There's a lot of very casual swearing in Australian culture, and even in the office. Like, I'm amazed how okay it is to swear in meetings and and in the office. It is, I suppose I'm very British. It takes me a while to get used to it. There we go, swearing in the office.
Okay, that's fascinating. I did not know that. Well, thank you so much for not swearing in the course of the presentation. I think we would have been surprised, most of us. And thank you so much for a really fascinating presentation, and thank you for everybody for coming. It is just 1 minute past 8, so we should probably stop there. So if we can thank Rachel in the traditional Zoom way.
Thank you.
I can actually clap. So I've got my microphone on. Do keep an eye out on our social media channels for news of future events, and I hope we will see you all again soon. So thank you very much, and good evening or good morning, especially to Rachel.